Hey there, my friends. Today, I'm not just here to share a story with you. I'm here to walk you through a real-life war, one that didn't happen on any battlefield, but inside a single family. A war that shook the world in its own quiet, powerful way. This is a story about two brothers, and not just any brothers. These two built something bigger than themselves. One gave us Adidas. The other created Puma. But behind those iconic names, behind the logos and the stadium lights, there was a family ripped apart by pride, ego, betrayal, and a silence that lasted for the rest of their lives. This isn't just a business story. It's a lesson in blood and ambition. It's about family and loyalty, about rivalry and regret, about what happens when winning becomes more important than being together. And while you're listening, you won't just be learning history, you'll be practicing your English too. I'm telling this story in simple, clear language, the kind you'd hear in a good movie. So not only will you understand every word, but you'll feel every moment. What you're about to hear isn't made up. It's all true. And once you know it, you'll never look at your sneakers the same way again. So go ahead, grab your headphones, take a breath, and open your heart. Because this is the billion-dollar family war. The true story of Adidas versus Puma. Let's start at the beginning, with two brothers and the dream they built together. All right. Let's rewind the clock, more than 120 years, to a little town in Germany called Herzogenaurach. Back then, it was a quiet place. Fields stretched out to the horizon, small factories hummed in the distance, and families worked hard just to get by. Life wasn't flashy or easy, just simple people doing their best to survive. One of those families was the Dasslers. They weren't wealthy. They didn't have any big business or fancy estate, just regular folks living an ordinary life. But hidden inside that ordinary life were two brothers who were anything but ordinary. The older one was named Rudolf, born in 1898, and 2 years later came Adolf, who friends would later call Adi. That little nickname might not have meant much back then, but one day, it would be printed on sneakers all over the world. Adi Dassler was quiet. He liked to keep to himself and loved working with his hands. School didn't really grab his attention, but shoes? Shoes were his obsession. He'd spend hours pulling apart old sneakers, examining the stitching, the soles, the materials, just trying to understand how they were built and how he could make them better. Now, Rudolf. He was Adi's total opposite. Loud, charming, and full of energy. Where Adi loved craft, Rudolf loved people and money. He didn't care much for laces or leather. What fired him up was branding, sales, and making deals. He was a natural-born salesman, always looking for the next big move. From the beginning, they couldn't have been more different, but together, they had the potential to build something powerful. After World War I tore through Europe, Germany was left in pieces. The economy had collapsed. Jobs were gone. Food was hard to find. And most people were just trying to hold on. But even in the middle of that chaos, Adi, now in his early 20s, decided to chase his dream. He started making shoes. Not in a fancy workshop. In his mother's laundry room. That's right, just a small room with barely enough space to move. He didn't have machines, he didn't have cash. What he did have was a sewing machine, some scrap leather, and an unstoppable drive. He worked nonstop, cutting, stitching, testing, improving. It wasn't pretty, but it was a start. By 1924, Rudolf had joined him. The two brothers officially launched their own little company. They called it Gebruder Dassler Schuhfabrik, which basically means Dassler Brothers Shoe Factory. They still didn't have much money, but they had something better, vision and fire. Adi focused on design, crafting shoes with care and precision. Rudolf handled the business side, pitching the shoes to anyone who'd listen. And somehow, that crazy setup, it worked. At the time, sports were becoming a big deal in Europe. People were starting to pay attention to track and field, football matches, and especially the Olympics. Adi saw an opportunity. He believed athletes needed better shoes, lighter, faster, and stronger. So, that's exactly what he built. In 1928, for the first time ever, German athletes wore Dassler shoes in the Olympics. It was a small win, but it planted a seed. And then came the real turning point, the Berlin Olympics, 1936. The world was watching. These games weren't just about sport, they were wrapped in politics. Adolf Hitler controlled the event and wanted to use it as a global showcase of Nazi power and so-called Aryan superiority. The stadium was packed. Nazi flags were everywhere. The crowd was ready to see Germany dominate. But something happened that no one saw coming. Something that would change not just the world, but the Dassler family forever. Into that intense political storm walked a young man from the United States. A black sprinter named Jesse Owens. And everything was about to shift. Now, you've got to understand, Jesse Owens wasn't exactly welcome in Nazi Germany. Hitler didn't believe for a second that a black man could outrun his so-called superior German athletes. The pressure on Jesse was unimaginable. But while the world played politics, Adi Dassler saw something else: talent. Pure talent. He didn't care about race or propaganda. He saw an athlete who deserved the best equipment possible. So, quietly and without drawing attention, Adi went to Jesse Owens' room in the Olympic Village. Just think about that for a second. A German shoemaker sneaking into the room of a black American athlete in Nazi Germany, just to hand him a pair of shoes. It was a bold move. Dangerous, even. At a time when supporting non-Aryans could cost you everything, Adi ignored all of that. To him, performance mattered more than politics. He handed Jesse a custom-made pair of track shoes, lightweight, with long metal spikes built for better grip and speed. And Jesse accepted. What happened next shook the world. On the track, Jesse Owens didn't just win, he made history. 4 gold medals: 100 meters, 200 meters, long jump, and the 4x100-meter relay. He blew past every expectation. The stadium, filled with Nazi supporters, fell silent. Hitler was humiliated. But the rest of the world? They were in awe. And on Jesse's feet? Dassler shoes. That single moment changed everything. What had once been a small, family-run shoe company suddenly became a global name. The Dassler brothers had built something the world couldn't ignore. After the 1936 Olympics, word about their shoes spread fast, not just across Germany, but all through Europe and even into the United States. Orders started pouring in. What used to be a handful of shoes each week turned into thousands. By the late 1930s, they were making over 200,000 pairs a year. It was no longer a hobby in a laundry room. This was the start of a global sports empire. But with all that success came cracks. Inside the family, things were getting tense, especially between the brothers. Rudolf, the older one, started feeling like he was being pushed to the side. He watched as Adi, the quiet, thoughtful one, got all the credit after the Jesse Owens moment. Athletes loved Adi. The press noticed him. Rudolf felt invisible. Adi stayed focused on the athletes, on the shoes, on innovation. Meanwhile, Rudolf was out there selling, expanding, hustling to grow the business. Both of them started to believe the other was trying to take over. And to make things worse, their wives didn't get along at all. Even though they lived in the same house, the two families were split, each taking a different floor. That tension wasn't just about work. It seeped into their home life too. Soon, small disagreements turned into daily arguments. Every decision, every dollar, every newspaper mention, it sparked new fights. The factory that once ran on brotherhood started filling up with mistrust. And then came World War II. When the war broke out, Germany fell into crisis again. The economy collapsed. The government took over factories. Men were drafted into service. Suddenly, the Dassler factory wasn't making sports shoes anymore. It was producing military gear, boots, weapon parts, whatever the army demanded. Adi stayed behind to run the factory, doing everything he could to keep it alive. But Rudolf was sent to the front lines. And that drove a wedge even deeper between them. Rudolf was furious. He believed Adi had pulled strings, used connections, to keep himself safely at home, while he, Rudolf, was risking his life in battle. Their communication broke down completely. No more letters. No more trust. Just silence. And then, things took an even darker turn. In 1945, as the war ended and Nazi Germany crumbled, Allied forces moved into German towns, rounding up anyone suspected of being connected to the Nazi regime. Rudolf was arrested by American soldiers and interrogated. And here's where it gets ugly. Rudolf was convinced that Adi, his own brother, had betrayed him. That Adi had told the Americans he was a Nazi supporter, just to get him out of the picture and take over the business. Now, to this day, there's no solid proof that Adi actually did it. But in Rudolf's mind, it was absolutely true. And you know what? Rudolf never forgave him. Not once. Even after he was eventually released by the Americans, the damage was already done. Their trust was shattered. Their bond as brothers? Gone. Completely destroyed. And the company they'd built together? Torn right down the middle. When the war ended, it became clear they couldn't work together ever again. So, they split the factory. Literally. Adi stayed on one side with his group of workers. Rudolf took the other half and went his own way. Even their small hometown, Herzogenaurach, got caught in the middle. People had to pick sides. It was no longer just a family feud. It had become a community divide. Families turned on each other. Even the local football teams split. One team wore Adi's shoes, the other laced up in Rudy's. The brothers went as far as building two separate entrances into the same building so they wouldn't have to cross paths. And from that day forward, they never spoke again. Not a single word. For the rest of their lives. And then came two brands. Born out of heartbreak. Welcome to Part 2. The Rise of Adidas and Puma. The story of how a family war turned into a billion-dollar rivalry. From 1948 through the 1960s, two brothers, one broken home, and a town torn in two, gave birth to two global empires. Adi Dassler launched Adidas. Rudolf Dassler created Puma. But this wasn't about sneakers anymore. This had become something much deeper. It was personal. It was quiet, bitter, and incredibly public. In most towns, people talk. Neighbors chat over fences. Kids play together in the streets. Families gather for meals. But not in Herzogenaurach. Not anymore. After the Dassler brothers split, the entire town became divided. If your family worked for Adidas, you didn't dare talk to someone from Puma. And if you wore Puma shoes, you sure didn't marry someone who wore Adidas. Even local businesses took sides. The butchers, the bakers, the barbers. You were either Adidas or Puma. No in between. Locals even gave Herzogenaurach a nickname. The town of bent necks. Because before people spoke to each other, they'd glance down at your feet to see what shoes you were wearing. That's how deep this went. This rivalry wasn't just corporate. It was personal. It was everywhere. Now, let's talk about how the two brothers built their empires in such different ways. Adi Dassler's Adidas was all about innovation. He focused on designing shoes that were light, durable, and performance-driven. He spent time with athletes, listened to their feedback, and kept refining his designs to help them win. For Adi, it wasn't about chasing money. It was about chasing greatness. One of his biggest breakthroughs? The famous 3 stripes. Adi registered them not just as a logo, but as a functional feature. He believed those stripes made the shoe stronger. Today, those 3 lines are one of the most recognized marks on the planet. Meanwhile, Rudolf Dassler's Puma had a totally different energy. He was bold, sharp, and laser-focused on marketing. Rudy was a deal-maker, always in meetings, always pitching. He knew how to negotiate, how to build hype, how to make the brand feel exciting. He believed Puma represented speed and power. He even picked the name, Puma, to reflect that image, strong, fast, and fearless. While Adi was in the workshop with thread and leather, Rudy was in offices with contracts and sponsorships. Different styles, same goal, domination. By the 1950s, Adidas made a move that changed everything. Adi started working directly with Olympic athletes, not just handing them shoes, but helping them pick the perfect pair. He tweaked designs based on track conditions. He adjusted the spikes for different races. He even custom-made shoes for individual events. And his biggest innovation? Removable spikes. That simple idea lets sprinters change their spikes depending on the weather or the surface of the track. It was revolutionary. At the 1952 Helsinki Olympics, athletes wearing Adidas won gold, and the whole world took notice. Adidas became the top choice for national teams. It was a massive blow to Puma. Rudolf couldn't let that slide. He saw Adidas getting closer to the crown, the official shoe of champions, and he had to act fast. So he turned to football. Rudolf knew that football, or soccer, depending on where you're from, was the heartbeat of Europe. It was the most watched, most loved sport in the world. So he made his move. He began sponsoring local teams across Europe, handing out free Puma boots to clubs in Germany, Italy, France, even Brazil. And in 1958, Puma made a clever bet. They put their trust in a young, up-and-coming Brazilian team that no one was really paying attention to yet. And what happened next? Let's just say, it would change the world of football forever. Hey, my friends. Today I've got something real for you. This isn't just a story. It's a true family war that changed the world. No guns, no soldiers. Just 2 brothers, and a feud that split everything. One gave us Adidas. The other gave us Puma. But before they became global giants, they were just two boys chasing a dream, until ego, pride, and betrayal tore them apart. This story is about more than sneakers. It's about family, business, loyalty, rivalry, winning, and what it costs. And the best part? I'll tell it in clear, simple English so you can enjoy every moment and practice your listening while learning something powerful about life, ambition, and the things we sometimes lose chasing success. This really happened. It's not fiction. And once you hear it, you'll never look at your shoes or your family the same way again. So put on your headphones, open your heart, and let's begin. This is the billion-dollar family war, the true story of Adidas versus Puma. In the 1990s, Puma was going through a serious crisis. Sales were falling. They were losing out to Adidas, Nike, and Reebok. But everything changed when, in 1998, 30-year-old Johann Zeitz, the youngest head of a large company in Germany, became CEO. His vision was simple and bold, not to copy Adidas or Nike, but to create something new, a fashionable, bold brand for the streets, not the stadiums. Under his leadership, Puma changed direction. Instead of traditional sports, it focused on fashion and culture. The company began to collaborate with designers, artists, and models. Collaborations with Finny by Rihanna, Alexander McQueen, and Jay-Z were released. Puma became interesting again. Young, bold. And that's when the difference between the brands became obvious. Adidas remained classic, sporty, with a clean design and the famous three stripes. Puma, bright, bold, street, with a jumping puma as a logo. Adidas, about sports. Puma, about style. Adidas sponsored athletes. Puma, cultural stars. Both won, each in its own niche. The old family rivalry has now become a global competition of brands. By the late 1990s, Adidas was earning more than $5 billion annually. Puma was earning $1 billion. Both companies went public, Puma first, Adidas in 1995. But the interesting thing is that both were still based in the same German town, Herzogenaurach, and they were still competing, even after the brothers died. By the end of the 90s, a new culture had emerged, streetwear. It was no longer just fashion. It was a movement, a mix of sports, music, politics, identity. And Adidas and Puma were at the center. In New York, Tokyo, Paris, London, everyone chose a side. Three stripes or a jumping puma. Not because of family history, but because of what these brands meant. In 2000, Adidas and Puma had been competing for almost 60 years. But the new century brought new rivals and new rules. Chief among them was Nike. While rival brothers from Germany were fighting each other, Nike was quietly building an empire in the US. Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, LeBron James, Serena Williams. Nike wasn't just selling sneakers. It was selling ambition, confidence, American coolness. And it worked. By 2000, Nike was making over $9 billion a year. Adidas was making $5 billion. Puma was making just over $1 billion. Now Adidas and Puma had two choices. Either continue to compete with each other or reinvent themselves for a new era. They did both. Adidas began to actively invest in expansion. They bought the Salomon brand. Unsuccessfully, but significantly. In 2005, they shocked everyone. They bought Reebok for $3.8 billion. It was a move against Nike. Adidas already dominated in Europe. Reebok, in American gyms, the NBA, and fitness culture. Together, they became the second largest sports brand in the world, right after Nike. The rivalry was no longer just Adidas versus Puma. Now it was Adidas versus Puma versus Nike. The three-headed beast. Adidas didn't stop. They signed young athletes, invested in technology. They released Boost Foam, an extremely soft and elastic sole. PrimeKnit, a breathable material without seams. My Coach, wearable electronics before it became fashionable. Adidas became a sports brand, a tech company, and a fashion label at the same time. And Puma? They didn't keep quiet. In the 2010s, Puma realized one important thing. Nike and Adidas were competing for the male audience. So what if Puma focused on women? In 2014, Puma signed Rihanna, not just as an ambassador, but as the creative director of the women's line. Her Finny x Puma collection was bold, fashionable, and an instant hit. The sneakers sold out in a matter of hours, and social media exploded with photos of girls in the new sneakers. Puma went from being just another brand to an iconic, feminist, celebrity fashion choice. Revenues grew from $3.1 billion in 2014 to $4.2 billion in 2016. Puma's comeback was official. Adidas responded quickly. After triumphing in sports, the brand shifted its focus to culture and in 2013 signed Kanye West, who left Nike to launch the Yeezy line with Adidas. The release of the Yeezy Boost 350 in 2015 became a phenomenon. People stood in lines for days, the shoes sold out in minutes, and on resale prices reached over $1,500. Adidas gained a new audience, not just athletes, but cultural creators. The company also signed Pharrell Williams, Beyoncé, James Harden, Pogba, Mohamed Salah. By 2015, Adidas revenue exceeded $17 billion, while Puma was growing but still trailing at $4 billion. Until 2010, companies were forced to advertise through TV, magazines, and posters. But with the advent of social media, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, everything changed. Here, speed, stories, and emotional connection became crucial. Adidas adapted faster. They launched powerful campaigns like Here to Create and Impossible is Nothing, collaborated with famous bloggers, and had a clean style and clear messages. Their shoes became a fashion accessory, not just a piece of sports equipment. Puma focused on authenticity. They showed behind the scenes, energy, relied on influencers and street subcultures. They didn't want to look expensive, they wanted to be real. And the youth of Generation Z noticed this. It became clear that Nike is the king of high performance and motivation with the motto, "Just do it," for athletes and leaders. Adidas is the king of technology and culture with the slogan, "Impossible is Nothing," for creators and dreamers. And Puma is the king of style and everyday cool. Edge forever, faster, free spirits for trendsetters. Although the brands play different games, Adidas and Puma are still connected by the same blood. The war between the two brothers is now hidden behind hashtags, logos, and new product launches in Herzogenaurach, the city where it all began. The factory still stands. Both brands operate in neighboring buildings, and cemeteries separate Adi and Rudolph. But something has changed. In 2009, Adidas and Puma employees came together for the first time in over 60 years to play football. No competition, no espionage, no brand wars, just a game that symbolized reconciliation. It was a moment when it stopped being about shoes and became about healing. Herzogenaurach is a quiet town, with the same river and cobblestones, but two global corporations stand side by side. Adidas with its three stripes and Puma with its Puma. After fame, fashion, billions, and bloody disputes, the brands have evolved into global powers. After the brothers' deaths, the companies focused not only on sports but also on culture, technology, and fashion. They learned to adapt, change, and even compete in new areas. So here we are today, Adidas and Puma, two giants born from one family, still standing strong after all these years. Adidas is killing it, pulling in over $17 billion a year, mixing cutting-edge tech with culture and style. Puma? They made a smart move by focusing on fashion and women's empowerment, growing steadily with bold designs and star power like Rihanna. These two brands aren't just about shoes anymore. They're symbols of rebellion, of ambition, of identity. People around the world choose their side, not because of an old family feud, but because of what Adidas and Puma represent to them today. And get this, even though the founders are long gone, their legacy lives on right in their hometown. The factories still stand side by side in Herzogenaurach, and in 2009, employees from both companies finally kicked a ball together. No rivalry, no drama, just a moment of peace. The story of Adidas and Puma teaches us something powerful. Even from the deepest conflicts, great things can rise. It's about passion, pride, and the will to keep moving forward. And that's a lesson anyone can take with them, on the track, in the streets, or just walking in their favorite shoes.